Hey everybody, it's Richard Thomas coming to you live from the Lionheart Institute, and I want to talk to you about a topic that is very dear. We're going to give some resources throughout this dialogue that's going to hopefully be of benefit to some of our watching audience. For a long time, I wouldn't exactly say that I was a skeptic, but I certainly was not a proponent or in favor of a whole lot going on in the mental health industry. Now, there's personal reasons why I would say I was skeptical, but the primary reason was, as a person of color, I was terrified about people getting my name on paper. I think that one of the things that we as people of color fear is getting in the system. We already have so many things going against us. But to be honest with you, as I've grown, and co-host Tiffany Thomas has kind of helped me, I've come to a place where I've not only recognized the importance of mental health and mental health issues, but I've become an advocate for being honest about where we stand. Tiffany, if you would just share a little bit about where you're at. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're studying to become certified and a doctor, right. And very, very proud of you for all those steps that you're taking. But in the world that we live in right now, the COVID world that we're living in, mental health is such an important topic.
For sure.
I think a lot of people avoid it. I think it's very, very uncomfortable for most audiences, mm-hmm. right? Most people don't want to dialogue about the fact that they have some mental health issues.
Right.
Can you talk about the stigmas of mental health, and then just a little bit about where we are just kind of as a society, and we'll dialogue about that for a little bit.
You know, as you said earlier, you kind of were a skeptic, and It's really funny because I'm studying to be a mental health counselor professional, and you're not really for mental health counseling. Sure. So to say that we've had some struggles,
right?
Disagreements would definitely be very accurate and fair to say.
Say you were on the side of the Cocoa Puffs.
Right. I, of course, am an advocate for it. And so we've definitely had some pretty in-depth conversations and disagreements over those things. But what we come to as a consensus is that if a person is suffering, they need to find a way to heal themselves.
So very true.
So regardless of whether you're skeptical and I'm an advocate, we can agree on that for sure.
Absolutely.
And as that is the foundation to build from. I think that when you deal with mental health, there's a lot of stereotypes. There's a lot of stigmas attached to that. Absolutely. People are afraid to say that they're suffering from them. People don't want other people to think they're crazy. That is a common one. Oh, they're just crazy, right. Which I've heard you throw around a few times as well. Mm-hmm. So people just don't want those stigmas, and
Sure.
and they're afraid of what that will do to them. And as you mentioned, having that fear of things being on paper. People are afraid of
being labeled.
Talking to other people, being labeled. That is a
Sure.
huge thing. Nobody wants to be labeled.
I think as a person that's always sought success in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many obstacles that we face, so many things that are already stacked up against us, right? So many obstacles that we have to overcome that for me as an individual, dealing with mental health was a very difficult topic to discuss. Right. Because you always had to have a route of overcoming whatever was in front of you. Mm-hmm. And the worst idea, is this concept that the enemy isn't outside, this enemy's on the inside, right? That I have become so broken, so bruised by the society around me that it's literally started cracking my mind. That's kind of how I would picture it, right? Mm-hmm. I see a mighty fortress, right? This mind that I guarded, I protected, right. I worked hard on, right? In a world where you're walking home and being called the N-word, or you're getting kicked out of class because of it, or you're having your performance continually judged, which, sports are always in a judgment zone.
Right.
So to think that you would crawl in and start tweaking my brain about my confidence or my ability, right, mm-hmm. seems such a vulnerable place. To where I think that too many of us are running from dealing with issues that are crushing us, when really, if we were just to address them and be honest about them, mm-hmm. right? Honesty is such a huge part in dealing with it, that we could overcome them fairly easily, right? Or am I wrong that way?
I think a lot of people mistake actions, behaviors as being the root of the problem, mm-hmm. but they are actually symptoms
right.
of a deeper problem. For example, people who tend to have anger issues, They're labeled that they need anger management. Maybe they've been court ordered for anger management.
Sure.
And that's the problem, is the anger. But the truth is, anger is actually a symptom for something much deeper.
It's good.
And so lots of times we mistake the symptoms for the actual problems, and they're masking the deeper problems that are causing that to come out.
Right.
And so I think that having to be able to get a better understanding of what is causing the symptoms is the only way to truly fix the problems.
So when you talk about masking, unfold that a little bit, because obviously people have masked being happy in a relationship by coming home and just working hard and going to their room every night and going to sleep, and they mask and pretend they're in a good relationship because they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's and they're doing everything right? There's a lot of ways that people mask things, but unfold that a little bit.
Masking is what a lot of people are really good at.
Okay.
I suffered from a few different mental health disorders myself. I've had depression, postpartum depression, PTSD, and anxiety. And honestly, I was able to mask most of them. And people who were the closest to me didn't even know.
Have no clue.
That it was a problem. Didn't even know I was suffering on the inside, because I was so good at pretending that I was just normal.
Right.
That everything was fine, And the problem is, people who are suffering tend to be very good at that. And some of it's because they don't want to acknowledge that there's something going on because of those stigmas that we talked about, or the fear of what that brings. And sometimes people don't even realize that it is really happening. And I know when I had PTSD, I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know what was going on. I was just feeling a very specific way. I was really starting to feel like maybe I was crazy. I started feeling all these things going on, and I had no idea. And so it took somebody else being able to look on the outside and be like, okay, I think there might be some stuff going on here that maybe we should talk about, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
But for a lot of things, I think people have a sense that they're not right. Something's not right that they're feeling.
They don't feel quite on it.
Right.
On point.
They don't feel like themselves. And lots of times you can tell by behaviors. Depression is such a common one that people struggle with.
Sure.
And depression is a very easy one to see the signs of, because it directly affects your normal activities and behaviors in your life.
Now, when I think about depression, right, I think about somebody walking around in a Nemo suit, right? They're hooded up, they're in all black, they got rock metal bands around their wrists, right? They got a metal collar around their neck, whatever kind of situation that maybe looks at. But that's not what depression always is, right? It's just an altering of the joy and the peace on the inside of your heart, or how would you unfold that?
There's several different kinds of depression. It's not a one size fits all.
Okay.
It can affect each individual very differently. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, that it affects everyone very uniquely. You have what you call high functioning depression.
Okay.
And those are people that get up every day and they go to work and they work their jobs, they come home, and essentially they're going through a routine. They're not really living. They're just going through the motions.
Gotcha.
But to everybody else, everything is fine. And they're suffering more on the inside without people knowing. So high functioning is really kind of like masking things. It's living with that mask on. But you also have the depression the clinical depression where people can't get out of bed.
Wow.
They'll stay in bed for days. They want to just be in a dark room, and they just sleep all day. They just literally can't get themselves out of bed because they can't find a reason to get out of bed.
Sure.
At that point,
their goals are gone.
You feel hopeless.
Yeah.
You tend to feel a hole in your heart, in yourself, kind of like something is missing.
Yeah.
And you just often don't know what it is, and your body just tends to just shut down. You lose the things that you love most in your life.
Yeah.
You lose all interest in them.
Well, the Bible says that without hope, the heart fails, right?
Very
that
true.
Your heart falls into despair. Without hope, you lose focus. Without focus, you lose vision. Without vision, you start to run into all kinds of obstacles as far as the lascivious way that you live your life.
Right.
And so I think that, most recently I was watching a huge episode that took over the internet, was alive on almost every YouTube channel I was kind of watching. And it was that Seattle is dead, right?
Yeah.
And there was a huge dialogue about the epidemic of opiates in Seattle and how it's really destroying so many young people, but middle age as well, where there's this new homelessness that's arising. How are those connected? Because I know that a lot of times people will mask it in ordinary things, right? We used to think of the person that could drink all night, get up in the morning, be a functional alcoholic.
Right.
Right? What it sounds like you're saying to me is that there's functional depressants, right?
Depressing.
But how does that fit together with depression and opiates and just drug use in general? This storm really of self-destruction that is overwhelming people that could in other ways live healthy and productive lives, right? They could be massive contributors to society and the world that we live in. But now they're really trapped in this bondage of depression, of overwhelming shame, of overwhelming guilt that piles on now because they're potentially adding drug use to that. Drug use obviously can mask that pain, give them a little bit of inspiration to go out and do things. But the things that they do are not always based on wisdom now. It's based on an imbalance in their life, so they're making crazy decisions that are leading to guilt and shame afterwards. How closely are those linked, and how do we deal with those in a corresponding way that's a healthy form?
We kind of call it the trifecta. So when you deal with mental health issues, you are then susceptible to addiction issues. Okay, those kind of tend to go hand in hand a lot of the time.
They're kissing cousins.
They're kissing cousins, absolutely. When you deal with, let's say, the homeless, majority of homeless people are dealing with a mental health issue.
Right.
So people, it's very easy.
It's not just a drug addiction.
No,
it's not just
it's not. It's led them to that drug addiction or that substance addiction, whatever that may be. It has led them there, but that was not the original issue for the most part. A lot of people will look at homeless people and be like, well, they make a choice to stay homeless, right? They're just, they could go get a job. There's plenty of help, shelters to get them help.
And there's lots of help. And we'll provide some links for that because I think it's important that we as leaders who understand what's going on mentally also provide routes and bridges from a place of feeling trapped to a place of freedom.
Right.
So,
well, there's this understanding, or I should say acceptance by the population that they're homeless because they choose to be homeless, right? And that's really not the case for a lot of people. Unfortunately, most of them do suffer from mental health issues, and those keep them into a place where they don't know how to get out of it.
Well, it's tragic because, I was reflecting on this post-COVID.
Right.
I was taking the light rail quite a bit to work, and, I would get on the light rail, ride, get hit 10, 15 times for a quarter, $1, a nickel. I once counted from my work to the light rail, which is, I think, 2.5 blocks. I was asked for $37.25 between the light rail and my work. And there is this feeling amongst people that maybe aren't struggling with homelessness. They do have a job. They work really, really hard. They have to get up at 5 a.m. every day, right? They have to work till 6 o'clock or 7. In my case, 8 o'clock. I typically work, and then they're getting home at 8:30, 9 o'clock, right? Yeah. And they're getting asked for free money all the way to the bus stop or the light rail. They're like, "Gosh, you don't have any idea what I have to go through just to pay my bills, right?"
Yeah.
But really, it's more than them just being addicted to a drug. Or just having a mental illness. There really is a lack of support and help, areas to go to that they can get that support. Am I right or am I wrong in that?
No, I think you're right. I think that there are, especially today, been a lot of awareness brought to mental health. Before, it's kind of just had that taboo stigma attached to it. People didn't really want to talk about it. They didn't want to acknowledge it. Only people who went and saw shrinks, they're all crazy, you know. So there was just this awful taboo bubble surrounding it.
Right.
And now it has been talked about a lot more. It is being brought to the forefront. In Hollywood is very big. A lot of advocates in Hollywood for it.
Yeah.
In
Athletes everywhere.
right,
that are
athletes
speaking about it.
tremendously.
So proud of my athletes that are doing that.
Absolutely. It's becoming a lot more acceptable
Yeah.
and acknowledged, which is really important, because the more we acknowledge it, the less people suffer from it. And so
Why is that?
because people, whether they want to admit that there's problems or not, look, the reality is this world is a tough world to live in.
It is.
And I mean, how many of us are just working to survive? You know, we're not living, we're just surviving.
Sure.
You know, and when you're not truly living, then your mind gets consumed by so many ththings that just attack you. Right. Emotionally.
Weigh you down.
Right. Absolutely. And so it's hard to get out of that. So I would say, I would venture to say a high percentage of the population all have some kind of mental health concerns and
Sure.
problems that they deal with. And most of them don't even acknowledge them.
Well, if you look at the world we live in right now,
Right.
This very COVID society.
Yes.
I mean, people in some cases have been isolated for, 6 months now?
Yeah.
Many people out of work. Many people struggling to survive, pay their bills.
Yeah.
Trying to find a way, right?
Yeah.
Used to have relationships where they were able to call their mom and go over. Now you have governors and senators
Right.
telling you, if you want to protect your grandparents,
Yeah, don't
stay
say
away
that.
from them.
Yeah.
Right? And so now they're struggling with this loneliness. Grandkids are struggling with this loneliness, right? And wanting to
Yeah.
see their grandparents, or, God forbid you're in a split home.
Right.
What are you doing now with that? So, in all of that, the depression that's overwhelming, people having access to their grandparents gone.
Right.
Grandparents having access to their grandchildren essentially gone.
Yeah.
God forbid you're in a split home where now kids are typically used to a certain routine where they're able to see their mom, go see their dad. A lot of that has been interrupted now because we don't want to expose family members to outside things, right? You've got an entire class of students, particularly here in the Northwest where we're from, that aren't starting school, right? They're not elementary, not junior high, not high school, which means that they're not doing fall sports.
Right.
Which means you have all these kids running around who were anticipating being able to compete for scholarships or state championships or
Right.
playoffs for the first time. You've got
Yeah.
these kids that thought, I can become captain of my team,
Right.
who worked so hard, right, through their their freshman, sophomore, and junior year, and now it's essentially lost. We've got our own kid down in Oregon who
Right.
should be playing football right now, right?
Yeah.
Thank God he's able to go to school and still do some of those activities, but who's isolated,
Yeah.
right? We're not able to see him like we normally would want to. He's gone on to another grade for certain, another experience in life, but
Yeah.
also because of COVID, we don't just pack up and travel
Right.
like we normally would. And so you've got those mental health issues weighing down people that feel stuck, they feel trapped,
For sure.
right? What would you say some of the statistics of that are, number one? And then number two, how do they get help? How do they reach out and say, hey, I'm not okay, right? We're telling people, like, it's okay to say, I'm not all right, watching
Right.
the Breonna Taylor deal. But what about people just with general mental health issues? How can they get help that's valuable to them without exposing themselves to COVID and all the different things that we're kind of restricting ourselves from?
Yeah, COVID has definitely had a huge impact on people's mental health well-being.
Yeah.
I think when COVID first happened, a lot of people were worn out just from
They
life.
came into it.
Right. So I
Right.
think, this really affected us too, because, you work 12, 13-hour days most
Yeah.
of the time. I'm home with the kids, dealing with my own schoolwork and the
Sure.
children all day. And it's exhausting, so life happens. And I think a lot of people were really just burnt out with life. And when COVID happened, I think in the beginning, there was kind of almost like a much needed reprieve for
Sure.
a lot of people. I know for us, we kind of
It's like the year of Jubilee.
it was like
Right.
it started out with just kind of like, oh my gosh, like we felt like we could breathe for a minute. You got to be home and interact with the kids very differently than you had been able to. And I think as a family unit, we grew significantly together. And
I think of my 30 years of working, right, or whatever it's quite been. I think I've had 1 2-week vacation,
right?
Maybe 3 1 week vacations. So
Yeah.
for me, I've always been grinding.
Right.
I believe that that's kind of the nature of the beast. We want to be successful. You have to grind. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to eat, you gotta put your feet to the ground and do some work, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of the world that I grew up in. And having the COVID, at first it was kind of a breath of wow.
Right.
I've always been an introvert. Right, and people don't understand introverts
Yeah,
because here I am doing a YouTube channel, and I don't really like associating with people that much. Right, I've done motivational speaking pretty much my entire adult life, right, in front of crowds of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, so forth. And you would normally think that would have to be an extrovert, right?
Definitely.
But truly, my personality is an introvert. So even I went in thinking, oh, I could take a breath, right? But that breath almost became like suffocation.
It did.
Right? And so what do people do with that? I mean, that emotion.
Well, if you look at stats, you mentioned stats. So according to the CDC, since April, okay, because most of the lockdowns from COVID happened in the middle of March.
Right, sure.
So starting in April, depression in adults went up 40%.
It's staggering.
40%. Depression in young adults and children went up 20%. Suicide attempts and rate went up 11%. And substance abuse went up 13%.
Gosh.
Those may seem small numbers, people, but that is very significant.
No, it's massive.
It is a significant increase in people's mental health well-being. And it was a very tough situation. I remember us, like you said, kind of enjoying it at first, and all of a sudden you started to feel like you were suffocating.
Right.
And we started feeling very claustrophobic. My anxiety went through the roof. There was days where literally I was having panic attacks, days where I was hysterical.
Sure.
And you had to just give me a hug, and I was sobbing, and I'm like, can we just turn off the news?
Right.
I just don't want to talk about COVID for a couple days. Like, I just need to catch my breath, It's just fear of the unknown and wanting to protect your family, and being isolated is just tremendous on a person's mental health. And so everybody, nationwide, people started developing mental health issues or had them, but they got a lot worse.
And then you have the explosion of racism that occurs in America, to where now everything is. How much do you think that those two things are hand in hand? I
think significantly. I honestly believe when you were essentially locked down and locked up and isolated from everybody, the social interactions change dramatically.
Right.
So people's mental health changes dramatically, especially people who are extroverts have taken it the most difficult, and because they're used to just going nonstop.
Right.
Interacting with people, and they don't know how to emotionally process and cope with not being able to do that. So when you're sitting at home and you're isolated and you're in your head a lot because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything.
And you're stuck at home with an introvert. Right.
You just, it starts to just eat at you. Like I know that I had bouts of depression that would sometimes last a week or two here and there. And I remember one day waking up, I don't even know what day it was anymore.
Sure.
And it's crazy, just the thought of losing track of what day it was. It's amazing how much that can affect you emotionally and mentally. Just that loss of I don't even know anymore. Like I don't know what day it is. I don't know what's going on anymore. You're literally floating from one day to the next, and you feel very lost.
Right.
And when you start to feel lost, your mind is so open to being susceptible to other things to just crawl in there, and it just starts affecting you. And before you know it, you don't even find a reason to get out of bed anymore. Sure. And especially with everything going on here, people fear of income loss for so many people who were out of work for almost 6 months, some still out of work.
Right.
And so there was how do I feed my family? There was all this fear and chaos. And I think that...
Just this need to almost feel like I need a cocoon. And put
so then when we had all of a sudden... Yeah. So then when all of a sudden we have the new shootings of black men being shot by police officers, and the new deaths and murders that are creeping up, and the riots and the protests, that just adds a whole nother layer to the already devastated country that we had. The mental health stability of this country.
Sure.
And I think had we not had COVID, we may have reacted differently when the rest of this started really just kind of compounding.
More rational, maybe.
More rationally, for sure. I think
yeah.
it just, people just kind of snapped really quickly. And I think that is why, too, on social media, you see so much hate and racism and anger exploding on Facebook and Instagram, because people have been isolated for so long that they've kind of lost a sense of their humanity, their ability to interact with other people, and remember what that's like to interact with people on just a respectful, courteous way. Yes, for sure.
I've talked to so many people where it's like, hey man, you understand that COVID is going to end and we're going to find ourselves in the real world, right? I mean, it's like,
for sure.
Like, take a breath.
Yeah.
And understand that I'm not your enemy. It may feel like I'm your enemy. You may have watched 1,001 conspiracy theory ideas and concepts and ideas that we're against you and you're against us. But really, when you separate yourself from COVID, I think the interaction that we have on a daily basis keeps our mind a little bit more level.
Right.
In understanding, hey, wait a minute, I work with John. Wait a minute, I work with Sally. Right. Jamal isn't a bad dude. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Mr. President. I didn't say Mr. President, but that's what I meant to say. That we have all these ideas, right, that are easy to impact our mind, because we are oftentimes a product of our environment, right?
For sure.
And so it's not so much that people have reverted to a 1960s world.
Right.
It's that if they're feeding their mind with an environment of isolation, just us versus just you, and everybody is a threat, right? Now, truly in the COVID world, if we take this disease for what it potentially is, from a health standpoint, people are a threat. Right. And so there's a difference between fear and caution for health safety reasons, and then there's this anxiety that comes along that begins to twist our mindset and our ideologies back into a world of racism and us versus them. And if I can separate myself from this group, everything's going to be okay, when it's not. The issues that we have are not necessarily over there. The issues that we have are in here. Right. And it's really a heart condition that we need to deal with, and a mental condition. I heard one psychologist who was a teacher for years, made her living really kind of with the blue-eyed study, right? And she explains it very, very well, that racism is a mental disease. Yeah. And so when you are locked away, you have other mental diseases going on, such as depression, anxiety, those kind of things creeping on. It's going to domino with other mental diseases, such as racism, that's going to collapse the world that we live in. Yeah, right. For sure. Both in a personal way and in a worldwide way, where now all of a sudden we see struggles on the streets that we never would have seen. Right. If it was apart from this COVID kind of evil cousin creeping alongside of every other issue that we're having, right? For sure. And sometimes you don't even realize that it's happening. I know last weekend was my niece's birthday, Right. And so we did a drive-by train, with balloons and whatnot to celebrate her birthday. And I remember as we went there and we were driving off, tears just started filling my eyes, because it's making me a little emotional, because you don't realize how much you miss your loved ones. Right. And then when I was seeing my brother and my sister-in-law, my beautiful nieces, and it made my heart hurt, right. Because I realized how much I had missed them in the 6 months I hadn't seen them. Sure. And then, little Jax is in the back. My cousins. He was getting all upset as we drove by, and he was like, no, my cousins. He wanted to see his cousins and stop and play. And it just, it just definitely really, it really hurt my heart. And I think that we often don't realize how much pain we're in, especially with so much going on. And it's incredibly important to be able to recognize when you're feeling that, because how lonely you are. Right. How separated you feel.
Right. Yeah. And I always have this saying that I tell people that I'm working with, and I work a lot with women, and I tell them, especially moms, and I tell them all the time, it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many people are afraid to say I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I've had to do that at points in my life. I've had to do that with you. I've had to say, baby, I'm not okay.
Sure.
But
And I want to tell people of color all around the world, it is okay to say you're not okay.
Absolutely, 100%. Because being able to acknowledge that is truly the first step towards finding a way to heal it.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to accept it to fix it. And so I think that is really,
now,
really
when you say
important.
accept it, we're not talking about the 5 stages of grief.
No.
Right? We're talking about coming to terms with the reality, I'm not okay.
Right.
I'm not okay with the mental condition I'm in. I'm not okay with the significance of the events going on around me. It's overwhelming, right? I'm not okay with not fighting back.
Right.
I'm not okay without raising my voice. I'm not okay just getting pulled over and harassed. I'm not okay with just feeling this insanity.
Right.
So we're not really talking about the 5 stages of grief where you get to the point of view where you just take a breath and accept it and say the world is what it is.
Right.
I give up, right?
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
Although from a stoic mindset, right, there's things that are inside our control, things that are outside of our control. But mental health and having a real good picture of mental health is understanding the balance between that, right? Is understanding what can I control directly,
right,
what I can't control directly, and how to make wise decisions about that and still process this world that we live in without my brain exploding, right?
It's very difficult when you are suffering from mental health illness to make rational decisions. And
that's such an important value about becoming successful.
Right.
Is making rational, sound decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
You're kind of in a place where it is just truly impossible to, because you're literally almost like stuck in this bubble.
Yeah.
And you are not going to be able to process everything outside that bubble. Because honestly, you're getting from day to day, sometimes minute to minute, hour to hour. And so rationality kind of goes out the window. And especially with everything going on in society today, that is, I think, why a lot of people are reacting the way they are to certain events and things. But acknowledging what you're feeling is valid and very important.
Yeah.
And we all need to validate how we feel.
Absolutely.
And so,
And feelings are right. Feelings aren't
100%.
wrong. Right? Feelings come and feelings go. And feelings can be deceiving.
They absolutely
right?
can.
We need some sound principles
to
really live our life by.
Right. And it's so important to have somebody to be able to go to and say, I'm not okay.
Okay, so let me interrupt you a little bit, right? Because I think that we're on a strong vein right here. I've kind of told whether it's you, right? I think that there's some people that don't fully understand this, right? They don't understand it relationally. They don't understand it family-wise. I used to tell Christy this, right? I tell my kids this, right? So our family mission statement is we are one and our love never fails, right? One of the things that always happens in every relationship is healthy arguments, right? Or conflict. I call it healthy because I think that too many people tiptoe away from it. Obviously, we've talked in other episodes about cultural differences and the way that we communicate those conflicts. But one of the things that we've always talked about is keep my shit in my house. Right. I don't want to see my story on somebody else's Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear my business through somebody else's mouth.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a difference between getting help and gossiping with Sarah Sue on Facebook.
100%.
There's a difference between getting help, who you go to that's qualified for that, and just talking to a neighbor who lives down the street or around the corner. So unfold that a little bit, because I think that where people of color, certainly from the background that I grew up, right? You don't want your neighbor to know your business because we're going to deal with our issues and they're never going to resolve that issue.
100%.
So they're always going to view you through the eyes that I spoke to them in that moment, right? So there's a difference between getting a professional counselor. Unfold that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate, of course, for having a counselor or a psychologist. Obviously, that's what I am in training to become ultimately.
I'd go the direction more of a life coach.
That the life coaches are great too.
Yeah.
So it's really a personal preference of where you are in your life and what you need in your life. So those are different things, aspects that you're going to consider when you need to evaluate who you would like to go see professionally. I highly recommend having one, and not even being to a place where you're depressed or you're in a bad place to have one.
Now, and this person, back to that kind of point, they shouldn't be Auntie Sarah, right?
Right.
They shouldn't be Cousin Wendell, right?
100%.
They should be a professional of some sort, right? I know in the Catholic community they have not only mass, but they have confessions.
Yeah.
I think that's so healthy in a lot of ways, right? Because you're able to...
Right. Yes.
Right? Get it out. Now, I don't know the full process of the Catholic process, but you're able to get it out. They give you kind of a response that you're able to wrestle with a little bit. Either you do the repentance, I think it's called, or you don't, but you're able to have that dump, that response of an action plan, then you're able to take that action plan. Counseling is a little bit like that, right?
Absolutely. So I'm all about being proactive about your mental health. And so a lot of people...
Yeah, I believe it's so important.
Right. A lot of people will wait till they're in a bad place before they seek help. And just like with anything physical, well-being, you want to be proactive in taking care of yourself. And your mind is no different.
Sure.
And so I'm a huge advocate for people being able to have a counselor, psychologist, just a normal life, because life is difficult. And if you're in a place where you are able to process your thoughts and to work through things going on, emotions that kind of creep up at you, you can be proactive in preventing an onset of a traumatic experience or something that can trigger you to put you into a depression or an anxiety attack or panic attack or things like that. So being proactive is very important. Now, let's say you haven't got there yet, and you're starting to realize, okay, maybe I'm not myself. Okay. If you are not comfortable seeing a professional, and unfortunately a lot of people don't understand the process of counseling. There's a huge stigma with counseling that people have a lot of assumptions of what they think happens. So there's a lot of fear involved with that. So I really encourage you to give it a try and just try it out and see what it's really like. I promise you it's probably not what you think it is. And with anything, just like normal doctors.
So you're not going in to see like a voodoo doctor that's going to hypnotize you. Like, have you been hypnotized before?
No, I haven't.
So you're not going to go in there and see. Not that hypnosis is bad.
They have them,
right?
For sure.
But I'm not saying you're not giving up your free will in this session. Okay.
No, you're not going to have somebody tell you what to do. You're not going to have somebody tell you how to fix all your problems.
Yeah.
You're going in to be able to tell somebody, to help them be an outside look, to help you to process your own thoughts, to help you to find your own path at fixing them and how to help yourself with that. It's all about empowering you to help yourself.
Now, there's a lot of resources for when I played professional football. When I played with the University of Washington, I had what I would call life coaches or sports coaches, more specifically, right? Mental sports coaches to kind of think about the game and visualize the game and goal set the game. And that came with a significant amount of cost, right?
Right.
A cost I was more than happy to pay. And I think that anybody that can afford it, you should invest in a life coach or, as Tiffany's kind of talking about, invest in counseling, a psychologist, a business strategist, whatever those elements are to help you get your mind clean. But what do I tell my people of color or tell people that are maybe at a lower income level and they're really struggling with, how do I put food on my table?
Right.
How do I pay my bills in this world of COVID? No less seek help in what's going on the inside. I got what's going on the outside to face. What are some resources? Can we provide those? Will you put them in the link as far as that all goes?
Yeah, definitely. The beautiful thing is insurance companies have grown to include mental health, behavioral health as well. They've not only added them to benefits, but they've also increased the number of appointments and sessions you're allowed to have, which is pretty significant.
Yeah.
So there,
I wasn't even aware of that.
yeah. So it used to be very limited. Now they've increased it significantly. They're recognizing that it is better for people to be able to seek treatment and help for mental health well-being instead of.
It's just as important as,
yes,
as
100%.
a colon check or
absolutely
turning cough.
100%. And you know, yes.
Just to slip that in there.
They're funny. But yes, it is the same. You want to take care of yourself, and your mind is no different. So the important thing to know is that there is a lot of places. Valley City's Behavioral Health is one of them that I personally have worked with. I've done an internship with them. They're a wonderful place. They are a great place to go when you have state insurance.
Okay.
So no matter what your income level is, if you have some kind of state insurance, you can get mental health counseling. You can get it for your children. They specialize in working with children as well. They have a lot of different resources, so we'll definitely put a link to them because I definitely recommend them. But there's many other places you can go to that you can find different assistance with no matter what insurance that you have. So that's definitely something to not be afraid to seek help even if you think, well, I'm on state insurance, nobody's going to take me. There's lots of places that will be able to see you with state insurance. So don't let that stop you from being able to see somebody and get help that you may need, because it will definitely improve your life for sure.
Let me say this as well. When it comes, Lionheart Institute audience, when it comes to your mental health, when you seek a professional getting assistance, you're not tapping out.
No.
You're not saying, hey, the situation has become tougher than I am.
Yeah.
You're really going back to an old school philosophy or mindset of discipline, saying, hey, I want to work through the process of healing my mind.
Yes.
I really believe that we internally create our world and then it externally manifests. What I mean by that is I think that we see it first on the inside and then we begin to see those things manifest on the outside. So the world we're living in on the inside begins to double and triple and increase on the outside, to where what is overwhelming us internally will begin to show itself externally.
Right.
And so we see so much of that happening in the world that we live in today, where small mental pictures begin to manifest into a world of fear and hatred and disgust and beguile for one another. And we can heal it if we begin at the right spot, dealing with the right topic, which is ourselves. Right.
And like you said, it's important to understand and truly believe that it is not weakness to admit that you're not okay.
Sure.
It takes strength to admit that you're not okay. It takes strength to seek assistance and help when you're not okay. There's also things, and some people aren't comfortable seeing professionals, and that is okay, 100% okay. But there are things that you can do personally to help when you're not in a good place.
Sure.
One thing, it's something that I'm actually certified in helping people create, and it's called a W.R.A.P plan, W.R.A.P, and what that means is Wellness Recovery Action Plan. Now, this is something that you can do at home, and it's really just being proactive in creating a self-care plan. Okay, because self-care is essential to being able to have a good, balanced mental health well-being plan. And as a counseling student, it can be pretty intense. You can ask Richard. It's very draining, and life is hard on top of going to school for it. And so, it's one thing that our teachers constantly remind us: do you have a good self-care plan? Because self-care is tremendous. Now, it doesn't have to be an elaborate plan. These are individually based. There is no right or wrong plan to create. There is no one size fits all. And it is really individually unique to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, for me, music is truly healing for me. And I love to sing. I've been singing since I was very little, and that brings me immense peace and joy.
So good.
Reading a book or just taking a quiet walk, a bubble bath, these are all different things that you can find a way to center yourself, to just bring down the noise that you're hearing, the stress. So really, it's just finding simple things that when you are starting to feel like that wall is kind of creeping up and you're about to hit it, and you can recognize that you're heading that direction, you can grab your W.R.A.P plan and be like, okay,
here's where I'm at.
here's where I'm at. Right. It's recognizing where you see yourself, where you're going to a place that you don't want to be. And here's where I'm at. What are the steps that I need to do to take me back from there?
That's good.
And that's really important. And like I said, if you are uncomfortable seeing a professional, this is stuff that you can do for yourself. And it's just really about finding that serenity, that peace, whether it's, reading your Bible, saying a prayer, to just meditation, depending on what your beliefs are or what you choose to do. It's really just about finding that calm in the storm.
Yeah.
And when you can find that calm, it's amazing what you can get yourself out of.
Right.
And I have been at times, I've had medication for certain mental health, so I definitely...
Which, of course, is the area that I'm the most afraid of.
Right.
For most people, I think that people abuse drugs as it
Sure.
is, all right? So it's terrifying to me to relinquish that control.
Right.
Right? But say how you went in
Right.
to the plan of using it. Explain that a little bit.
So, I believe that there's a time for it, and I believe that it's not always needed to. So I understand where you're coming from. I do believe that there's a time that it can be beneficial.
Sure.
So when I had to be on medication for some depression and anxiety, I had already hit that wall and was at a place where I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah.
Or I was at a place where I was literally in the hospital having a panic attack.
Sure.
Where I couldn't breathe.
And it's not necessary to wait that long. Right?
No, not at all. But I was not able to recognize where I was in those places in my life, so I'd hit those walls. At those points, I needed to have some medication to help kind of get me stabilized to a place where I could breathe again and be able to rationalize.
Right.
Things
But your
in my
action
life.
plan was always to come off of that.
I never was a huge fan of medications. I personally did not like how I felt on some of the medications. And that is not, I personally am more into all natural homeopathic type things, non-addictive stuff. I have a lot of faith in them. They work really well. And so my plan was always to wean myself off of them. To just get me through that really hard moment.
Because there is a level of and obviously I'm not speaking as a doctor or as a psychologist at this point, but there is a level of dependency, right? Where now all of a sudden you go to becoming an addict and you're beginning to use your mental health as kind of your excuse for the drug addiction, right? And so I think it's important that, and only you know this, right?
Right.
No one can make that adjustment for you. But I think that's why I shied away from it for so long, where as soon as I got a life coach, as soon as I got a sports coach, a sports psychologist, right, I recognized the benefits of it immediately. Visualizing, goal setting, manifesting your destiny, right? I began to understand it really, really quickly from that perspective. Obviously, other areas I still needed to grow, and I'm thankful that our relationship has helped me do some of that, right?
Yeah, me too.
But, from the standpoint of a vision magnet, which is what I've always called it in the workshops that I've done.
Yeah.
The law of the vision magnet is we move towards and attract that which we really think about most. Well, I think that in mental health and wellness, it's so important to create habits of mental clarity and mental visualization and becoming tranquil with yourself, calm with your picture, right? Figuring out the W.R.A.P program for you to do that.
Yeah.
What works best for you. And then being consistent with it, because if you're not consistent, you can find yourself at that wall.
Yeah.
And then you need that help. But once you've gotten that help, really being honest with your therapist, with your psychologist, with a counselor, and saying, "Hey, here's my intention."
Yeah.
Right? I want to back off the wall. I want to be free. Okay.
Yeah.
If we need something to help me do that, then you help me monitor that. I want you to be accountable therapist for making sure that I'm not on this for a prolonged period of time unnecessarily.
Right.
To be free. Right.
I do think that there is kind of a line sometimes, and this is of course not with everybody in this.
Sure. Some people do need it for a lifetime.
Right. And there's individuals that, only this, that it's different for everyone. But
and don't let anybody shame you off of what you need.
100%.
Sure.
100%. Yeah. Don't ever feel ashamed that you have to take stuff to make yourself okay.
Yep.
Never be ashamed.
Your body is your body.
Because you are doing something to better yourself, and that's what's really important.
Sure.
But I do think that there is a balance
Yeah.
in there. I think some people they kind of stop making changes for themselves and depend on the medication to keep them at that place.
Right.
I think that's where I got to was realizing that having the medication helped clear my mind. right? We talked about not
focus.
Yes, not being able to rationally think and make decisions. It helped me get to a place where I could rationally see things again and be able to make rational decisions for myself. And at that point, I began to see, okay, what is causing my depression? What is the root of that? What do I need to change for me to be able to pull myself out of that? And I think once I got to that point, I was able to slowly wean myself off the medication, because I realized, okay, now I know what's causing the issues.
Yeah.
And I know now I have a plan how I can fix it. So I think once you get to that point, then you are able to really help yourself and figure that out. Figure out the roots of it, what's causing it, and then pick yourself up and make changes for your life that will get you out of that. And, and a lot of people, unfortunately, don't make those decisions to dig deep enough to figure out what is the root, what's not just the symptom, but what is the cause.
It's powerful.
And so when you can really dig deep and find the cause, you'll be able to fix the symptoms really easily.
That's awesome.
And so, I definitely encourage people to really just look on the inside and really search and figure out, where is that pain coming from? Where is that anger coming from? Where is that anxiety coming from? And the truth is, I live with anxiety all the time. It's probably something that I will live with forever. It has its own triggers. I don't always know when it's going to happen. I don't have control over a lot of that, which is very frustrating.
Sure.
I can be a control freak sometimes, and not being able to control that aspect of what triggers it is really difficult to emotionally process sometimes. But when it happens, I have a homeopathic medicine that I take personally, because it does wonders for me. Help kind of just bring me down for a minute. You are a huge help with that. So having somebody who's very supportive for you is tremendous. And it's obviously most beneficial if it's your spouse, because they're right there, and being able to communicate with each other, to be able to say, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling, I just need maybe a little bit more support from you. And being able to recognize that is huge, and unfortunately, if your spouse isn't as understanding about these things, kind of like where we maybe originally started, then definitely find somebody who can be that support for you, whether it's a friend, a parent, a professional. You definitely need a support system, because this is not easy for anybody. But the biggest thing to understand and to know is that you are not alone.
You're not.
100%. I promise you, you're going to feel like you're alone, but you are not. There is millions of people out there suffering through mental health issues, and they suffer alone because they think that they're alone. And that is just not the case. So please don't be afraid to reach out. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you too if you want to chat about anything. So please, we'll definitely list some resources of people that you can reach out to as well. And
Tiffany can help you develop a W.R.A.P plan.
100%.
We do, as Lionheart Institute, we will have coaching available in due time, as far as helping you reach your goals, set goals, and how to mentally get to those goals.
Absolutely. So, definitely understand that it's real. Whatever you're feeling is very real.
And spouses out there, I want to encourage you as well, just for a moment, with somebody that may be suffering from anxiety. The reason they're suffering from anxiety is not always you. The ego gets into it a little bit, and when stress is high, it's very easy for you to get lost in a feeling of guilt or not understanding the situation, or even fear. But your spouse, your significant other, whether it's depression or whether it's anxiety or whether it's a myriad of other mental illnesses, they're not always caused by you or your relationship with them. And so don't feel like the weight of the world is on you if they come to you and share with you their struggles. Those struggles aren't necessarily created by you. And for myself, I oftentimes would struggle with that feeling of lack of control.
Right.
Of being out of control, feeling as though I had failed when you would come to me and say that. And I would take it personally. Right?
Very personally.
Like I treat you good. I put food on your table. I pay the bills. I make sure you get your hair did, your nails did. I break it off right. I do everything I can do. And so there's this sense of guilt or shame that can come with it. And you can postpone your loved one's success. Listen, Lionheart Institute, I don't think that there's a more valuable topic that we could talk about today than mental health. Living the good life is all about having mental clarity and understanding of who you are and what you want to achieve in your life. Tiffany, this is a valuable topic that we're talking about today. Is there any last thoughts that you would want to leave with our audience that is important to you that they would know from your heart and from your mindset what they can do?
I definitely want to say that there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, you're not crazy, and you didn't do this to yourself. Most mental illnesses are brought on by traumatic situations in people's lives that they had no control over. And so I very much want to tell you that this isn't your fault and that you're not weak. And, I want to encourage you that it takes strength to recognize when you're struggling with something, and it takes strength to ask for help. And so I very much want to encourage you. There's times in my life where I didn't know how to ask for help, and that's something I've had to learn to do, and to learn to say that I need it. And that's very difficult for a lot of people to recognize and to be able to do. So I highly encourage you to just be okay saying I'm not okay. I can't say that enough. Definitely get help. Whatever level that is for you, whatever comfort zone you're in with that, get help, because you don't want to stay in that place where you're at. It's lonely, it's dark, negative things happen, and you don't want to be there for long. So definitely I encourage you to seek whatever you need to better that in yourself, so that way you can find peace and you can find healing and not be alone in this process, because it's scary and it's intimidating. And I remember one time you used to, when you were just talking about being the significant other and what you deal with, and you used to tell me that, well, I'm with you, so I shouldn't have any mental health issues.
I am your drug.
No joke, he used to tell me, well, you shouldn't have any problems, you're with me. Like, why would you have problems? And I remember it took a few years of trying to get you to understand that it had nothing to do with you.
Sure.
Right? It wasn't a matter of you causing it or you being the
root of it.
The root of it, or the
solution.
Thank you. I can think of it. The solution for it. It literally had nothing to do with you. And so now, while you help with a lot of right, and that's hard for people sometimes to understand, and so we dealt with that, of you thinking, well, I should be able to solve all your problems, and it doesn't always work that way.
Sure.
But definitely look on the inside, really look at your heart, look at what is inside, because it's painful. I'm not going to lie, sometimes to really reflect on yourself, and a lot of the issues that cause some of these mental health are very painful, and they're hard to want to deal with. But I promise you, if you learn to start to acknowledge them, if you speak them, you will start to heal from them.
That's good.
And those mental health issues you'll find are becoming less and less and less. And so, as I said, there's numerous different ways you can treat them. It's all a matter of what your comfort level is and what you feel safe doing. And so I very much just encourage you to continue to reflect and, seek whatever treatment is acceptable for you.
What a powerful episode on mental health, being honest with yourself, and getting the help that not only you should get, but that you deserve to reach your goals and your vision. This is powerful. It's from our heart, and we want you to reach your full potential. Tiffany is an author, a writer, and a blogger. She has a very powerful website, particularly for women, called www.missionimpossiblemom.com. I'll put that in the description. If you're at a level right now where you just need a W.R.A.P program, she also does that, and that's a way for you to engage with her. Here at the Lionheart Institute, we will also be providing life coaching as well. So be engaged with your mental health. Tiffany, I am so happy that you joined us again today as the co-host of this wonderful channel and getting out a message of hope to people all around the world. We're excited about you. We're excited about your capacity, the dreams and the goals that are in your life. And we know that there's no obstacle that you can't overcome to reach your full potential. God bless you and have a great day today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.